Mama's living room was off limits. House rules. Every black kid from the 1970s knew by heart. There was a room in every black household that children understood was not for them. It was right there, visible from the hallway, sometimes even connected to the spaces where daily life happened. But crossing into that room without permission was a violation that could bring consequences, swift and certain. The furniture in that room was covered in plastic that crinkled when you sat on it, not that you were allowed to sit on it. The carpet was vacuumed in perfect lines that showed every footprint. The lamps had shades that had never been touched by childish fingers. This was Mama's living room, and the rules that governed it were absolute. Before we dive into these memories, if you're new here, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another trip down memory lane. And as you watch, drop a comment below sharing your memories of the rules in your household. We love hearing your stories, and they make this community so special. If you grew up black in America during the 1950s, 1960s, or 1970s, you knew the rules. Not because they were written down or posted on the wall, but because they were taught through repetition, through correction, through the occasional application of a wooden spoon or a switch, or whatever instrument of discipline your household preferred. The rules were the architecture of childhood, the boundaries that shaped behavior and built character. And while some of those rules might seem strange to today's generation, for us they were simply the way things were. This is the story of the house rules in black households. The story of the living rooms we could not enter, the plastic-covered furniture we could not sit on, and the discipline that taught us how to move through the world. The living room was the most sacred space in most black homes, and its protection was paramount. This was the room where company was received, where the preacher sat when he came to visit, where important conversations happened on rare occasions. The furniture in this room represented a significant investment, often purchased on layaway over many months. Chosen with care, maintained with devotion, Mama was not about to let children destroy what had taken so long to acquire. The plastic furniture covers were the most visible symbol of this protection. Clear vinyl sheets were draped over sofas and chairs, tucked into cushions, secured so that every inch of upholstery was shielded from the threats of daily life. The plastic served its purpose. It protected the fabric from stains, from wear, from the accumulated damage of bodies sitting and shifting, but it also transformed the furniture into something almost untouchable, a display rather than a functional seating area. Sitting on plastic-covered furniture was an experience unto itself. In summer, the vinyl stuck to bare skin, peeling away with a sound that announced your presence to anyone within earshot. In winter, it was cold to the touch, shocking against the skin until body heat finally warmed it. The plastic crinkled with every movement, making it impossible to shift position quietly. For children who were occasionally permitted to sit in the living room during holiday gatherings or when special company came, the plastic was a constant reminder that this space was not really theirs. The rules about the living room were part of a larger system of household governance that black children learned from earliest memory. These rules were not arbitrary. They served purposes that parents understood, even if children did not. They taught respect for property, for shared spaces, for the adults who worked hard to provide the home and everything in it. They established hierarchy, making clear that children occupied a particular position in the family structure. They prepared children for a world that would have its own rules and consequences. Don't run in the house. This rule was universal, repeated in every black household with the weariness of something that had been said 1,000 times before. Running indoors risked breaking things, disturbing neighbors in apartment buildings, and creating chaos where order was supposed to reign. The rule applied regardless of circumstances, being late for something, being chased by a sibling, having urgent news to share. You did not run in the house, period. Don't slam that door. Every door in the house was to be closed gently with intention and control. Slamming doors was not just noisy, it was disrespectful, a tantrum expressed through architecture. Children who slammed doors learned quickly not to, either through verbal correction or through more direct means. The sound of a slamming door could bring Mama from wherever she was, and her arrival was never good news for the slammer. Turn off lights when you leave a room. Electricity cost money, and money was not to be wasted. Black families who had worked hard to afford their homes and pay their bills were not going to let children run up costs through carelessness. The rule was about more than just the electric bill. It was about respect for resources, about understanding that nothing came free, about learning to be mindful of consumption. Close the refrigerator door. You're letting all the cold out. Standing with the refrigerator door open, staring at the contents, trying to decide what to eat, this was not permitted. You opened the door knowing what you wanted, retrieved it quickly, and closed the door immediately. The refrigerator used electricity. The food inside cost money. The act of standing there with the door open was wasteful and would not be tolerated. Don't touch the thermostat. The temperature of the house was an adult decision, not subject to negotiation or adjustment by children. If you were cold, put on a sweater. If you were hot, go outside. The thermostat was connected directly to the utility bill, and children did not have the right to increase that bill through their personal comfort preferences. Many children did not even know how to operate the thermostat because they had never been permitted to try. The rules about food in the kitchen were equally strict. Meals were eaten at meal times, not whenever hunger struck. Snacking between meals was limited limited or forbidden entirely, both because food was not unlimited and because eating proper meals was considered important for health and family cohesion. Children did not simply help themselves to whatever they wanted from the kitchen. They asked permission. Did you ask for that? The question was rhetorical because Mama already knew the answer. Taking food without permission was a violation, regardless of whether the food would eventually be eaten anyway. The rule was about respect, about acknowledging that the food in the house belonged to the family collectively and was managed by the adults. A child who took food without asking was demonstrating a failure to understand their place in the household order. You better eat what's on that plate. Wasting food was not tolerated. Children were expected to eat what was served to them, without complaint, without leaving portions behind. If you did not want to eat something, you should not have taken it. If it was served to you, someone had decided you needed it, and your personal preferences were not the primary consideration. The children in Africa who were starving, while perhaps not literally invoked in every household, represented the general principle that food was precious and not to be wasted. Don't eat in the living room. Even on the rare occasions when children were allowed in the living room, food was forbidden there. Crumbs, spills, stains, these were threats to the protected furniture and carpet. Food was eaten in the kitchen or the dining room, at tables designed for eating, where messes could be contained and cleaned. The living room was kept pristine, unsullied by the ordinary mess of daily life. The rules around respect and speech were perhaps the most strictly enforced of all. Black children in the 1960s and 1970s were taught a code of conduct regarding adults that left no room for ambiguity. Respect was not optional. It was the foundation of every interaction between child and adult. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Yes, sir. No, sir. These were the only acceptable responses to questions from adults, not yeah or uh-huh or any other casual acknowledgement. The formal address was required regardless of context, regardless of relationship, regardless of your feelings about the adult in question. A child who responded to mama with yeah could expect immediate correction, verbal at minimum and physical if the offense was repeated. Don't talk back. When an adult spoke, children listened. When an adult gave instructions, children complied. There was no space for argument, for explanation, for the child's perspective on the situation. Talking back, offering any response other than compliance, was one of the most serious offenses in the household code. It represented a challenge to adult authority that could not be tolerated. Children who talked back learned painfully and memorably not to do so again. Speak when you're spoken to. Children did not initiate conversations with adults, particularly adults they did not know well. When company came, children greeted them politely if spoken to, but did not insert themselves into adult conversations. The phrase, "stay in a child's place," captured this principle. There was a place for children, defined by their age and their position in the family, and they were expected to remain there. Don't put your mouth in grown folks' business. Adults had conversations that were not for children's ears. When such conversations happened, children were expected to make themselves scarce, to find somewhere else to be, to understand that the matters being discussed did not concern them. A child who lingered, who listened, who, worst of all, offered an opinion, was inserting themselves where they did not belong. The physical discipline that enforced these rules varied from household to household, but was nearly universal in some form. The wooden spoon was iconic. Kept in the kitchen drawer, it served dual purposes, as cooking implement and behavior modification tool. The belt, removed from the waist with a sound that every child recognized and feared, was common in many households. The switch, cut from a tree in the yard, was particularly associated with southern households and grandmothers who had their own ideas about discipline. The discipline was physical, but it was not random violence. It was connected to specific offenses, administered with a clarity of purpose that children understood even as they cried through it. You knew what you had done wrong. You knew that the consequence was coming. The discipline was part of a coherent system in which actions had consequences and rules had meaning. Many children report that the fear of the consequence was far greater than the consequence itself. The warning was usually enough to ensure compliance. The rules applied not just within the home, but extended to behavior outside it. How children behaved in public reflected on the family, and any embarrassment caused by a child's behavior would be addressed when the family returned home. Wait until we get home was a promise of consequences delayed but not forgotten, a warning that the public setting was providing only temporary protection. Don't show out. Showing out meant behaving in ways designed to draw attention, to demonstrate for an audience, to perform misbehavior. Children who showed out in public, throwing tantrums in stores, acting up in church, being loud or disrespectful where others could see, were violating a fundamental rule about representing the family properly. Act like you got some sense. This phrase captured the expectation that children would behave reasonably, thoughtfully, in ways that demonstrated they had been raised properly. Acting like you had sense meant being polite to adults, being quiet when quiet was called for, being orderly in your movements and moderate in your demands. It meant showing that your parents had done their job in raising you. Don't embarrass me. The warning was direct and the stakes were clear. A child who embarrassed their parent in public would face consequences at home. The family's reputation was collective property, and each member was responsible for maintaining it. A misbehaving child reflected poorly poorly not just on themselves, but on their parents, their grandparents, and everyone connected to them. The rules about guests and company were particularly elaborate. When company was expected, the house went through a transformation. Cleaning that went beyond normal daily maintenance was undertaken. The good dishes came out. The living room, normally off limits, was prepared to receive visitors. Children were briefed on expectations, how to greet the guests, where to be and where not to be, how long to be present before disappearing to let adults talk. Speak to company. When guests arrived, children were expected to present themselves, greet the visitors politely, and demonstrate that they had been raised with manners. Hello, how are you? And it's nice to see you were minimum requirements. Sulking in a bedroom, refusing to greet guests, or being rude in any way was a serious offense. But after the greeting, children were often expected to disappear. Go play or go to your room signaled that the adult portion of the visit was beginning and children were no longer needed. The children might listen from nearby, straining to catch adult conversation, but they did not participate unless specifically invited. When company brought children, other rules applied. The visiting children were guests and were to be treated well. Even if you did not particularly like them, your toys were to be shared, even your favorites. Any conflict was to be resolved quietly, without adult intervention if possible, without violence certainly. The reputation of the family extended to how you treated visitors, even small ones. The rules about personal presentation were strictly enforced, particularly regarding church and school. Children were expected to be clean, groomed, and dressed appropriately for every occasion. Looking like something was the standard. Looking like someone with self-respect, with parents who cared, with a sense of how to present oneself to the world. Wash your face and hands. Cleanliness was not optional. Before meals, before company, before leaving the house, children were expected to be clean. Dirty faces and hands were embarrassments, signs that standards had slipped. Mothers who sent children into the world looking dirty were failing in their duties. Comb your hair. Hair was to be neat, controlled, presentable. For girls, this often meant elaborate processes, pressing, braiding, styling, that were time-consuming but required. For boys, it meant regular haircuts and daily maintenance. Hair that was not properly done reflected poorly on the whole family. Put on clean underwear. The reasoning often cited was, what if you're in an accident and have to go to the hospital? The idea being that strangers would see your undergarments and judge accordingly. But the rule was really about thoroughness of presentation, about being properly put together from the inside out, about standards that applied even to what was not visible. The rules around respect for elders extended beyond the immediate family to every adult in the community. Any adult had the authority to correct a child's behavior, and children were expected to accept this correction as legitimate. If a neighbor saw you misbehaving and said something, you listened respectfully and complied. Then you worried about whether that neighbor would tell your mother, which would result in additional consequences at home. What did Mrs. Johnson say to you? Mama would ask, already knowing the answer because Mrs. Johnson had called ahead. The child who had been corrected by a neighbor would then face correction at home for whatever behavior had prompted the neighbor's intervention in the first place. The village raised the child, and the village included everyone on the block who knew your family. This community discipline was not experienced as intrusion, but as care. The adults were watching out for children, all children, not just their own. A child who was heading toward trouble might be redirected by any adult who noticed. A child who was in danger might be protected by whoever was nearby. The rules extended beyond household walls because the community was an extension of the household. The consequences for breaking rules were certain, but usually proportionate. Minor infractions might bring verbal correction. A sharp word, a warning, a look that communicated disappointment. Repeated or more serious offenses brought physical consequences. The hierarchy of discipline was understood by everyone, child and adult alike. I'm not going to tell you again. This warning was serious. It meant that the next offense would escalate consequences. A child who heard this knew to correct their behavior immediately because again would bring punishment. Go get me a switch. The requirement that a child select their own instrument of punishment was particularly memorable. You went outside, selected a branch from the designated tree, stripped the leaves, and brought it back, knowing exactly what was coming. Bringing back a switch that was too small would result in being sent back for a proper one. The process was itself part of the discipline, the anticipation and participation adding to the lesson. But discipline was always followed by reconciliation, by explanation, by love. After the tears, after the punishment, parents explained why the rule existed, why the behavior was unacceptable, why the consequence was necessary. I discipline you because I love you was not just something parents said. It was something children came to understand was true. The rules served purposes that children did not fully understand until they were grown. They prepared children for a world that would not be gentle with them. Black children in America faced realities that required particular skills. The ability to follow rules precisely, to show respect, even when it was not deserved, to manage behavior in ways that avoided danger. The strictness of Black households was partly a response to the stakes involved. A white child who misbehaved might face minor consequences. A Black child who misbehaved, particularly outside the home, might face severe consequences from a society that was not forgiving of Black childhood. Parents disciplined strictly because they knew the world would not discipline gently. I'm preparing you for the real world. This explanation, offered by many parents, captured the philosophy behind the rules. The house rules were not arbitrary exercises of power, but deliberate preparation. A child who learned to follow rules at home would be able to follow rules at school, at work, in society. A child who learned respect at home would know how to show respect in situations where respect was required for survival. The rules also transmitted values across generations. The importance of family, of respect, of presentation, of community. These values were taught through the rules and their enforcement. Children learned what mattered by learning what had consequences. The things that prompted discipline were the things that violated values, and through discipline, values were transmitted. Many adults who grew up with these rules report enforcing similar rules with their own children. The rules were not just arbitrary restrictions, but wisdom passed down, strategies for raising children that had proven effective over time. The specific forms might change. The plastic-covered furniture might disappear, the wooden spoon might be retired, but the underlying principles persisted. The rules also created structure in households that faced chaos from the outside world. Economic instability, racial injustice, uncertain futures. These were the contexts in which Black families operated. The rules created a zone of order and predictability within the household, a space where children knew what was expected and what would happen if expectations were not met. Looking back, adults who grew up with these rules often have complicated feelings about them. The discipline that seemed harsh at the time is often appreciated in retrospect. It taught lessons that proved valuable. The restrictions that seemed arbitrary revealed their logic over time. The strictness that felt like oppression came to be understood as protection. But there is also critique. Some of the discipline was too harsh, some of the rules too rigid. The physical punishment that was normalized in many households is now understood differently, questioned by child development experts and reconsidered by parents who experienced it. The rules reflected their time, and times have changed. What remains valuable is the underlying commitment to raising children intentionally, to having standards and enforcing them, to preparing children for the world they would actually face. The specific rules may evolve, but the principle of having rules, of teaching respect, of maintaining order, these continue to have value. The plastic-covered furniture is mostly gone now, replaced by different approaches to protecting household investments. The wooden spoons have been retired in many households, replaced by other forms of discipline or by different philosophies entirely. The rules have evolved as society has evolved, as understanding of child development has grown, as new generations have made their own decisions about how to raise their children. But for those of us who grew up with those rules, they remain part of who we are. We learned things in those strictly governed households that we carry with us still. We learned respect. We learned discipline. We learned that actions have consequences. We learned that we were part of something larger than ourselves, a family, a community, a people, and that our behavior reflected on all of it. What rules did your household have? What happened when you broke them? What lessons did you learn that you carried into adulthood? Share your memories in the comments below. Let us remember together the rules that shaped us, even as we evaluate them with the wisdom of years. And if you have not already, subscribe to this channel and ring that bell so you never miss another journey into the beautiful past that made us who we are. This is our story. This is our household. These are our rules remembered with a mixture of laughter, gratitude, and the occasional wince.